Hello, this is Daisy Tanner, and you're listening to Voices from Nowhere. I still haven't found our next voice from nowhere, so I figured that in this episode I would tell you a story. It's a story that a lot of us know here in Nowhere. A long time ago, when nowhere really was nowhere, a man named Ezekiel built a house. It was simple, made out of barely stripped cottonwood logs and just big enough for his wife and a hypothetical child. The man was an adventurer, you see, and he had decided to venture out as far as he could, as far as his legs and his horses would take him, till he found a beautiful valley entirely hidden from everywhere around it. In front of the house he built in this valley, he put a sign. Welcome, dear travelers, to nowhere. I guess that was a joke. But the name stuck. Eventually, his best friend also joined him in this valley. The friend was named Joshua. Eventually, the two found gold in one of the many streams that ran through the valley, and that set off a boom in the valley. People started coming from everywhere to see its beauty and share in its wealth. But the passion for adventure never really stopped for Ezekiel and Joshua. They kept exploring new streams, attempting to make a complete map of the Nowhere Valley. One day, they saw a monster. I know how that sounds, but that's how the story goes. On a winter's night, in the middle of an unexpected storm, they saw it. It was hungry, they could tell that by the thing's near skeletal frame, but that didn't mean it didn't look strong. There was a look in its eyes, a look strong enough to pierce through the gusts of snow like a knife goes through flesh. And before the two men could react, it lunged at them. Perhaps lunged is too physical a word, too slow of a word. It suddenly was at the throat of Joshua. Ezekiel screamed as much out of fear as out of sorrow for his friend, and somehow this cry scared the thing away, taking Joshua's body with it. The men of Nowhere searched the whole forest for any signs of the creature or the friend. Neither were ever found. My mom told me that story when I was like 5. So that probably explains a lot about who I am as a person. If you haven't guessed already, Ezekiel Tanner and Joshua Hill are mine and Sybil's great-whatever grandfathers who founded the town. The place that I've been walking around this whole time was the previous site of Ezekiel's cabin. They moved it back in the 60s to the Nowhere Historical Museum. There used to be other cabins here too, but I guess no one cared about them. All that's left is a few foundations and stairs that lead to nowhere, roads that are more plants than concrete, I guess. It's kind of sad, no one comes up here anymore. But at least there's a plaque, so I guess that's pretty nice. I used to be really scared of that story. I mean, it's understandable, but something about the way that the monster was described really unnerved me. It's probably the part about his eyes being like knives. To feel less afraid, I convinced myself that the story was a metaphor. There was no monster. It was just the harsh reality of winter. But whenever I walk out here, it feels like there's something more. More than the wind, more than the trees and the rivers and the old foundations and the stairs that lead nowhere anymore. That feeling follows me everywhere in town now because of what Sybil and Hester said. Anyway, that's kind of the folktale town legend behind the founding of Nowhere. If you ask any person over a certain age in town about it, they'll always basically say the same thing. Sure, the details are different, like Ezekiel found the sign or Joshua wrote the sign, but the thing that always stays the same is the monster. Here's what we know. In 1887, when the town was founded, there was a record-breaking and very sudden snowstorm for our area, and that record is still unbeaten today. It is possible that other people died in the storm, but if they did, they were not as well documented as the death of Joshua Hill. There was a sort of mini gold rush in Nowhere, but most of Nowhere's early exports were the trees. It's been scientifically proven that trees grow really fast here. Apparently there was a paper about it in 2005. Apparently, trees that grow in Nowhere Valley can reach a diameter of up to 3 feet, 2% faster than the trees outside of the valley. So, obviously, we became a lumber town. We already had a massive river, the Roe River, to transport all of the logs, and in some versions of the Nowhere founding story, all of the men in Nowhere cut down every single tree in the valley, only for them to grow back fully the next night. Obviously, that's hyperbolic, but it's interesting that people were noticing how fast the trees were here, even back in the 1800s. I guess it's time to talk about Madeline Arlington. Madeline Arlington is the reason that we are not a lumber town anymore. She became the CEO of Nowhere Lumber Company in the 80s, and she decided to move the headquarters of the company outside of the valley. This sounded like a good idea at first. Nowhere was originally founded because it was so hard to get to and there was nothing else around it. So access to the US 86, which is the nearest highway to us, and access to a giant river like the Roe would actually probably be really good for business. It turns out it was not really good for business. The naturally fast tree growth of Nowhere had spoiled us, I guess, and our tree-based hubris caused the company to basically run out of trees instantly. Nowhere Lumber Company failed soon after that. We tried to mine silver, and then coal, and then we tried to smelt silver, but nothing worked quite as well. There is nothing like these trees. No one in Nowhere has named a child Madeline since the 80s. That's a fun fact. One of the girls I knew in high school was actually named Madeline, but she was from out of town and everyone called her Maddie, so I guess her sins were forgiven. I really feel like this podcast has gone in a direction I was not expecting. I was expecting some stories about, someone's grandfather's experience as a lumberjack, or maybe I'd score a guided tour of the museum, but this has all just been a lot. And I am one step away from making a full-blown conspiracy board. Maybe that's crazy because I'd only have red string to connect between two things. A Leviathan that a ghost told me about, and a murder that happened in Maryland. Whatever the Leviathan is, it has to be related to the monster from the story of Ezekiel and Joshua. It has to. I mean, it's too weird not to, because every single story of the founding has that monster, and now there's something in town that is malicious, maybe? And maybe that's why Ezekiel and Joshua's ghosts are somewhere else. They're not with our families. I mean, maybe the thing, whatever it is, swallowed Joshua? When Hester was describing the Leviathan, she said a whale or a sunken ship, and that seems like ways to describe a black hole, but not having the words to describe it. This giant mass. Maybe when Ezekiel eventually died, it also swallowed him. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was so big that it was able to follow Thomas to Maryland, and that's what made him kill his brother. I'm doing a lot better than I was at the end of the last episode. You can probably hear that in my voice, and but I'm still, I don't know. I'm actually going away for a week and a half. I usually do this around this time. Anyway, I go to visit my cousin Janine in Bombay Beach, California. I stay at one of those like fancy resorts that they have there, but this week and a half feels like a brain break. Like I need it. Like if I don't get away from nowhere and stop thinking about all of this, I don't know. I've never felt this way before. I've never been so aware of where I am and of the things and people around me so much before. And as I said earlier, it follows me all through town now. For the first time ever, I feel like I am not at home here. It feels different, and I'm not sure why. The place that I'm sitting right now is a concrete slab, unofficially called Area 53. I'm not going to say exactly where Area 53 is, because if a town official listens to this podcast and then finds it and then cleans up this slab, I'll probably cry. Anyway, it's named Area 53 because a long time ago, some teenager spray painted "Welcome to Area 53" on it. And then people have just been adding to it ever since. One of these was done by Janine and I when she visited town a few years ago. And coming here makes me feel real and lasting. Because no one knows who originally spray painted here. Who knows what happened to them, if they're alive or dead, or if they moved away, or maybe they're just living in town now. They have a job. But they have concrete proof that they existed, even if no one knows it's them. So, even though I know everything ends, everything has to end, or else what's the point? I like coming here because maybe it'll last longer than I do. Maybe this podcast will last longer than I do. I'm sorry. I swear, I don't mean to get existential at the end of every episode. But this isn't the last episode. It can't be, because this is going to end eventually, but it's not going to end yet. So, until next time, dear listeners, thank you for coming and listening to me. Thank you for making me feel real and lasting. Thank you.